Hello and welcome to today's KDP University's At Home with Crystal Swain-Bates. I'm Trisha, and for the past 5 years, I've moved around Amazon's books teams, learning the business so I can share it with authors. But we're definitely not here to talk about me. We're here to talk about Crystal. So, celebrated children's book author with over 100,000 books sold, Crystal Swain-Bates is on a mission to positively reshape the way children of color all over the world see themselves. She founded Goldest Karat Publishing in order to address the lack of diversity in children's literature and normalize Black girl magic and Black boy joy. Crystal has been featured in Forbes, Essence magazine, and the Huffington Post, and her books have been used as props for TV shows such as Being Mary Jane and The Game. Originally from Atlanta, Georgia, Crystal holds 2 degrees in international affairs from Florida State University and worked for the CIA before becoming a full-time author. Known as a diversity publishing pro, Crystal offers several resources to authors who want to bring their books to life through self-publishing. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you so much. That was an amazing introduction.
Well, you are definitely an amazing person. Lots of information. CIA, really?
Yeah, I mean, shh, don't tell anyone.
Don't tell anyone. Well, that's a bit of a departure, CIA to children's books. Tell us about that journey.
Oh my goodness. Well, I feel like I have to start from the beginning. So when I say
Okay.
beginning, I mean like all the way back to the 80s. So back in the 80s, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an author all the way back then. And
Wow.
to me, I think it's really weird because most people that you meet, they're not doing the thing that they wanted to do, that they said they wanted to do when they were a kid, but I'm actually doing it. And it's absolutely amazing to me that I get to wake up every day and do the thing I said I wanted to do when I was a kid. But as you mentioned, I didn't quite go directly to becoming a children's book author. I didn't think that I could earn a living. I feel like you hear that you can't make money from publishing. I didn't want to be a starving artist, and so I didn't major in English or creative writing or anything like that. I went to school for international affairs, which I love. I love to travel, and got a master's degree in that and traveled all around the world, worked for the federal government, as you mentioned. And then it got to a point where I said, you know what? I've ticked off all the boxes of the things I wanted to do, except publish a book. And that's how I ended up becoming an author.
So did you self-publish your first book, or did you go straight into self-publishing, or did you ever work with traditional publishers?
No, I always knew that I was not going to try to find a traditional publisher. I mean, for me, I just couldn't bear the thought of sending out my manuscript to all of these different people and hoping and wishing, please, will you publish my book for me? Please put my book on your list, on your roster. Please say it's good enough. So instead of waiting for somebody to say yes to me, I said yes to myself, and I self-published. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, well, now that you found some success, do you think you would, try to find a traditional publisher now? And I'm like, why would I do that? I love it. I absolutely love self-publishing. I love it. And I'm so glad that it's so easy to do, especially in this day and age.
So what's the thing you love most about self-publishing, other than you don't have to deal with any rejection letters?
No rejection. Well, I love that I maintain my creative freedoms. That's very, very important to me, especially for the types of books that I write. I want to make sure that I have creative control over what my characters look like, even like the characters' names, what their facial features look like, how they're drawn. I have control over everything, and it's really important to me. So, I feel like I'm my own boss. And, when I have a vision in my head for my books, what I end up creating is what that vision was. And it has not been changed or muted or toned down by someone else's vision.
So why did you decide to go children's books versus, kind of the traditional novels or something like that?
Oh, now that's a good question. So I was looking for children's books. That's one of the things. I was looking for children's books, and I was looking for books that featured Black characters, and I couldn't find any. I mean, I was having a very hard time finding, this was back in 2012, very hard time finding them. And funny enough, growing up, I wrote several children's books. So I said, you know what? There's no point in me complaining about it. Instead of complaining, let me just be the person to fill that gap. And so I started writing books for children. And as I did research into, self-esteem, representation, I learned that children develop their sense of self at a very young age. So I said, okay, I think I'm doing the right thing, because as long as kids are able to see characters that look like themselves, and as long as other kids are able to see characters that don't look like them, starting out at an early age, they can learn to have tolerance for people who are different, starting at a younger age, not when they're already, 10, 12, 14, and they've developed lowered self-esteem or bad habits.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. I know when I was a child, way back when, a lot of our children's books had animals as characters, right? They completely avoided representing any skin tone because they just went and did animals. So I think that changed in the 90s. And to your point, there was a lack of diversity in the marketplace.
Yeah, and it's pretty unbelievable to me that there's still such a big lack of diversity. And I mean, especially when it comes to like thematic books, so just books like, hey, I live with my daddy, or I'm going to the dentist. Do you know what I mean? Like, even in books like that, there's still a huge gap in seeing characters of color. So there's a lot of room in the market. And for me, I really literally feel like if I wrote one book every month, I would never be able to fill that gap.
Right. We need more voices in that space. Absolutely. So children's books are a little different, right? Especially the children's books that you write, because they're not just words. So novels are a lot of work writing the words, but there's also illustrations that accompany your narrative. Do you do the illustrations, or do you have an artist you work with?
Listen, I can only draw stick figures, okay? I am no illustrator. So yes, I have to find illustrators. It's definitely a hard process, and funny story. I can look back at it and laugh now. But back, I think it was around 2007, I was trying to publish my first book, and I didn't have a lot of money. I went online and tried to find an illustrator for like $200. Told them I met up with this person at the coffee shop, explained everything that I wanted, and the illustrations that I got back were pretty indicative of my low budget and this person's experience, So I wasn't able to publish that book because the characters were horrific. And I actually I didn't publish my first book until 2013. So like that's a big gap between 2007 and 2013. And it's because I got stuck. I hit a roadblock. And it's the same roadblock that a lot of other people who want to write children's books hit, is how on earth do I find an illustrator? How much does it even cost? So it's definitely a bit different than, if you're writing in a different genre where you can just sit down, put your thoughts on paper and then have it edited. You have to have an entire other person involved in bringing your vision to life. And for children's books, the pictures are a huge part of the story. So they're very important.
Absolutely. So how do you go about, tell us your process of identifying an illustrator. What do you look for? when you're looking for an illustrator?
Well, I look for someone who can draw diverse characters. And that might sound really weird, but surprisingly, I guess the way artists learn how to draw, it's just very Eurocentric.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of the characters that artists were drawing for me, and a lot of the characters that you see in traditionally published books, I call them chocolate coated characters because they're just a character that could be any race. You know what I mean? And they just kind of color them brown, dark brown, and now it's a Black character. But you know, there's no hairstyles. It's just different. So I look for someone who can take direction, because once I get that initial draft character, I always change the character. So I literally can look at the character and say, okay, make the eyes this shape, do this, add more texture to the hair. And then by the end of it, we have a character that I'm really excited about. So someone who, you know, can take direction, and someone that's really creative, because I can't draw. So, you know, having someone that's extremely creative that can add little touches, you know, in the illustrations, it really makes the book, because kids notice the tiniest of details in your books.
They do, absolutely. And I think that you're 100% right. I actually went to art school, so that's my background. And speaking as an artist, I know that one of the things that I did learning to draw was drawing myself, right? So my features, and that is very indicative. So being able to find an artist who's trained and able to do, to your point, be creative and draw other nationalities, I think is huge.
Wow, I can't believe you went to art school, man. You could be illustrating books.
A little bit different. My drawing skills are rusty. It's been a long time since I've worked in that space. But so thank you for that. I know that we're going to, with a $200 budget, I think that was definitely a challenge. Can you give us an average of what somebody could expect to pay an illustrator? We're not asking exactly how much you pay, but kind of in your experience, you know, as you've moved through the process, what's a range that they would expect to pay for an illustrator?
So I get the question all the time, and you know, it's a weird thing to ask, you know, just because it can vary. So what I like to tell people is that you can find an illustrator in any budget. Now, if you have a book that's going to be, let's say, 32 pages, okay, the way you can kind of cheat this process is by doing 2-page spreads. So instead of needing 32 illustrations, you only need 16. Okay. And so if you find an illustrator and they charge $50 per page or $80 per page, that's going to be, you know, not too bad of a price. That's going to be like $500, $800, somewhere within that price range. So you can find an illustrator, I would say a pretty good illustrator, for a 16 2-page spread book for less than $1,000. If you have a $600 to $700 budget, you can find someone. $200, you're really stretching it, and you might end up wasting your money the way I did back in the day. So yeah, I would say within, you know, again, less than $1,000, you can find someone. But keep in mind that person that you find, it's not going to be the big name illustrators. You know, you can look online, see all the, oh, I love this. This is cute. You're liking all the pictures. That illustrator is probably going to be a lot more expensive, and worth maybe $200 a page, maybe $400 a page. So that's why I like to say you can find someone in any budget, but I do highly recommend that you have at least a budget of $600.
So iterations, you talked about the fact that when you get your illustration back from the illustrator, you know, you change things. So knowing that you've got these spreads, 32-page book or 16-page book, how long does it take for you to write and then illustrate and manage that process?
Well, I'm glad that you said manage that process, because it really is project management. At the end of the day, a children's book is just project management. So I have a book that took me some of my books take me over a year.
Mhm.
And it's just because it's usually that last page that I'm like, because most of my books rhyme. So it's usually that one page where I'm like, I can't get the rhyme the way I want it to be. But usually the rest of the book I'm able to finish very quickly, like 2 or 3 weeks. But it's
Uh-huh.
that last page and the title that I get stuck on.
Uh-huh.
So outside of that, I would say that the shortest length of time it's taken me to publish a book, and probably the average amount of time,
Mhm.
is 4 to 6 months. I would say
Okay.
4 to 6 months. And so that allows me time to come up with the idea. Usually when I have that idea, I can literally get it out of my head.
Uh-huh.
Decide on my title, then play around with 1 or 2 rhymes that no one else is going to notice
Right.
except me. I have to get it perfect. Send everything over to an illustrator, go back and forth to get the character designed. That's the first thing I
Mhm.
do, is I design the character. Once I've designed
Mhm.
the character, then the artist has, pretty much the freedom to draw, and it's a lot smoother of a process because we're not still tweaking. So
Right.
yeah, 4 to 6 months, you can have your book written, published, and on Amazon.
There you go. The other question we get frequently is about formatting. So it's a little bit different with children's books or illustrated books. The formatting. Do you do your own formatting or do you outsource that?
I've done both.
Mhm.
So more recently, including my last maybe 3, 4, 5 books, I formatted myself. And
Uh-huh.
so now sometimes people kind of use the wrong word, or they kind of interchange formatting and typesetting. So to be
Right.
clear, when you have your children's book, you can have your illustrator typeset, which is putting the words on the page. Um, but sometimes I found that illustrators are just, they're really good at illustrating, but maybe they're not as good at the typesetting,
Right.
so I've hired typesetters to do that. And then
Uh-huh.
formatting is just kind of putting it all together so that it's a print ready file. But
Right.
that's the easiest part of it. I mean, really, if you send it off to someone else to do it, a professional, that's really your best bet. I usually don't
Mhm.
recommend to people that they try to typeset or format their own book, because you don't want it to look, I always tell people, you want your self-published book to be able to compete with a traditionally published book.
Right.
And that means you don't want it to look like you just used a word processor in your computer. You
Mhm.
want it to look professionally done. So yeah, I can do it myself, but it's because I've been publishing for so many years.
So what are the difference? I'm assuming there's a unique challenge to marketing. So once you have it published, then you want people to find it. And it's unique with children's books because you're not marketing like novels, you market directly to your consumer or your reader. With children's books, you're not. So talk a little bit about some of the challenges with marketing children's books.
Yes. So I get so many people when they meet me and they see that I write these children's books, and they say, wow, I'm going to write a children's book. And I'm like, well, hold on now. I know it seems so easy, but
Right.
it is very hard to market. So when
Hmm.
you're marketing your children's books, you have 2 people to think about. You have 2
Hmm.
avatars to think about. You have the parent, because that's who's buying the book. It's typically a parent or a teacher, but we'll just say the adult. And that's who you're
Right.
marketing the book to. But then you also want your book to be appealing to the child. So
Hmm.
you have a big job. You have to make sure that your book is at the appropriate age range. You have to know, before you ever write the first word of your book, what age range am I writing for? Is this book
Hmm.
for a 6 to 8-year-old, or is it for a 10 to 12-year-old? Because obviously that vocabulary will be different. But that's one of the
Right.
things people get. Like, this is very foundational when it comes to marketing any book, but especially for a
Right.
children's book. Who is your avatar? And I mean, getting deep down, like filling
Hmm.
out on a piece of paper. How old are they? where do they live, what's their belief system, all what are they concerned about, what are they passionate about. It's very detailed. And if you can't do that, if you cannot identify who your book is for, if you think that your book is for everyone, you're not going to be able to sell that book, because your book is not for everyone. Your book is for a specific group of people. So I tell people, think about if there was a person that was your biggest fan. This is a person that is shouting you out all over online. They buy every single one of your books. What does that person look like? How many kids do they have? Is it a male or a female? Why are they buying your books? What are the pain points that your books are filling? And so for me, my books are primarily purchased because parents, and I have a very specific avatar, but because parents want to show their children books with characters that look like them. And they want to do that in order to boost their self-esteem. And, and so it kind of goes on from there. So you just have to figure out who that person is and why they're buying your book. And it is definitely harder because you can't just put it in front of the child to buy. If it was just for the child to purchase, they would probably get your book off the cover alone. But unfortunately, you have to identify two people, the child and the parent. So it's a lot harder.
Let's talk about the covers for a second. I think that's a good call out is, we know that children will walk through a store and go, I want that. Or, go online and say, I want that. How much of the design is for the parent and how much of the design is for the children?
Oh, now that's a really good question. I've never actually thought about it that way. So what I would say is you probably want a very healthy combination of both. So the way that I do my books, the way that I prefer to do them is to keep the cover simple. So one of the things people don't think about is that when you're selling your book, and you're selling your book online, it's on Amazon, most people are scrolling on their phones. That little thumbnail is tiny. So you need your cover to be thumbnail friendly. And that means that someone should be able to, just from seeing that little thumbnail, someone should be able to tell what your book is about, get some sort of a general feel about your book. And so to do that, you have to make smart usage of your space. So I like to make my characters huge. I'm talking about, I like for my characters to pretty much take up the entire cover. You can kind of see from, just some of my books that are here, this character is taking up most of the book. And I do that for all of them. And it's because when that character this book is shown on Amazon, you see that it's a Black princess. And for a parent that never gets to see Black princess books, that parent is like, what? A book? Yeah. Let me click this. You can see it. If someone's looking for a book about potty training and your book cover has a character that's sitting on the potty and they can see that, they're going to click it. If it's about a dentist, a trip to the dentist, and it's a child and they're holding a big tooth, they're going to see it. So for me, that's what's most important, because you need to capture the eye of the parent, of the purchaser. And you need to do it even when that cover is really tiny.
Right. Having that one element that communicates so much is huge.
It's really important. And what I see a lot of people do is they try to put too much stuff on the cover. So they might have an entire scene from a book that's on the cover, and now their characters are tiny like this, and a whole bunch of font, lots of words, tiny little italicized and cursive letters that no one can read. And I'm like, no. You need people to be able to read this thing and not have to squint, not have to click on it to see the full title. So simplicity is key. Keep it simple, keep it clear so that people know what your book is about and they want to purchase it.
Right. All of that clutter that you were talking about, we call that noise. There's a lot of, if you think about it this way, there's a lot of noise on the cover, and so you can't figure out what element's most important. So you need you need to make that decision and say, this is the most important element.
Exactly.
Nice. Exactly. All right, we've got loads and loads of questions coming in, all sorts of questions coming in. So if you're comfortable, we can switch to answering some of the questions that are coming in.
Sure.
All right. We're doing that a little bit earlier. We usually don't do it this early, but I'm just seeing this keep going and going. So let's see what we've got here. All right. While I'm sorting through this, we did have some questions that came in during the registration. And one of the interesting ones, do you sell more ebooks or paperback or hardcover books?
I absolutely sell more paperback books. Absolutely, all the way. I would say I'm probably at 90% paperback sales. Might be a little high. 80% paperback, maybe 10% hardcover, and the rest is ebooks.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So we talked about this a little bit. Where do your ideas come from? Like, what topics do you feel that you want to cover?
Oh man. So my ideas just kind of come from everywhere.
Uh-huh.
They come from everywhere. So, sometimes I'm inspired by things I see on the news. For
Hmm.
example, there was a time when a lot of little girls were getting in trouble at school for just wearing their hair out, just naturally in an afro.
Hmm.
And so I said, man, let me make sure I'm continuing to write books that show kids like your hair, you're beautiful just the way you are, the way you naturally
Right.
are. So that inspires me. Things for my own personal life. So like I like to travel. And in one of my newest books, I have a character that's traveling. So it's funny because before the actual idea pops into my head, the title pops into my head. And then I
Oh,
work
really?
backwards. Yeah. Yep. I already
That's
have
interesting.
titles for future books that I haven't started to write yet.
Do you feel, so that's a really interesting concept. Do you feel constrained with that at all? Like you have to then force the prose to fit with that, or no, it works for you?
I don't. And the one time, there's only been one time that I didn't have my title all the way ready to go. And when I tell you, I had the hardest time doing it in reverse. Like I
Uh-huh.
finished the book, I need a title. I had the hardest time and I never was happy with it.
Uh-huh.
But these ideas that pop into my head for my titles, they usually end up being kind of like with Big Hair Don't Care. That came into my head and I was like, I'm going to write a book. It's going to be called Big Hair Don't Care. And I knew I would use that phrase throughout the book. And so it's the
Uh-huh.
same with my other ones. I already know what it's going to be. And I don't feel like I have to, they're short little catchy phrases, and short
Uh-huh.
catchy phrases, book titles sell well. So
Good. Can I tell
yeah.
you, every time I hear Big Hair Don't Care, I get goosebumps. I do. Every single time. It happens every time I hear it. I just love that phrase so much. Marianne wants to know if you have any suggestions for marketing to schools. This is a great call out because, getting books in schools and having them feature it, it's a huge driver. Do you do much of that?
Well, I did before our current state of the world. I did a little bit more, but yes. So this is how I've gotten into schools. And what I suggest is, especially now, because what I've done before is I would reach out to someone there, whether it's the principal, and I would offer to come to the school and just do a free book reading or a
Hmm.
coloring party. I've done that, and it's always worked extremely well. But what I
Hmm.
do is I tell them like I need to come in on a day when you're going to have like parents there. So if you're having a
Right.
school program, and so then I set up my little table right outside the doors of the auditorium. They announce it at the end of the event, and then
Uh-huh.
it's so easy to get like $300-400 of book sales like that quickly
Hmm.
from the parents. But I would say get in touch with they have different names. The media specialist, the school librarian, that's the person
Right.
that's purchasing the books for the school. And
Uh-huh.
so they have control over the books that they get. So if you are able to get their information, get their email address or phone number, and reach out to them and then say, hey, I would love for you to add my book to your school library. You can
Hmm.
offer to send them in a book so that they can review it. And
Hmm.
that's it. It's actually not as hard as you would think because so many people are looking for books. And if your book
Right.
is hardcover, especially if your book is hardcover, they prefer hardcover. And it's something that's like a subject matter that, dinosaurs, like a teaching educational subject matter, that makes it even better.
Right. Do you ever go directly to the teachers and like donate to their classrooms or anything like that?
So what happens is teachers actually end up coming to me because, so the thing is, y'all, if you can get your readers to start taking the books in. So what happens for me is parents will take, my book in to the teacher and say, hey, here's the book for story time, or hey, I'm going to read this book. And that's how the teachers become more aware of them. So it's kind of interesting that you can kind of go backwards. But yes, I have donated books to schools. I've done a lot of events with kids all over. And I really do think that the best way for children's books is to get the parents to bring them in to the teachers. That actually works out incredibly well.
Okay. So John has a really interesting question. Do you think it's acceptable for a white author to feature characters across the color spectrum when writing for children?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. So to feature characters across the color spectrum, I would love to see everyone doing. I would definitely love to see everyone doing. Yes. Please do. Please make your books more diverse.
All right. Since you're a self-published author, and we don't get this as much anymore. We used to get this, but being a self-published author, do you feel like you have to legitimize your being an author versus those traditional publishers, the traditional authors? There used to be kind of a wide gap where some people kind of look down on self-publishing. Do you see that that's still a thing?
No, I definitely don't. I will say this, when I started publishing, so the first book came out in 2013, I felt funny about it. Like when I would say, oh, I'm an author, I wouldn't say I'm a self-published author because I didn't want that to be a reason that someone refused to put my book in their store. And then back then, some of the things, would say like no self-published titles allowed. So things have totally changed now. It's totally changed. And now what you're seeing is you have a lot of people whose books have been turned into movies that are self-published. So it's a different world now. And I haven't felt that way that I used to feel since, 2013. It actually feels very empowering to be self-published. And I think that people will look at you. I feel like people look at me and say, man, she's self-published and her books have gone so far. That's inspiring because she did that work. She didn't have a team, of a traditional publishing company to push her books. She did it herself. And if she can do it, then so can I. So yeah, I definitely think it's changed.
I think that it's very empowering to hear you say that because I agree that that stigma is no longer there.
Nope.
Talking about formats, you mentioned the fact that paperback or a physical book sells better. Have you ever thought of doing audiobooks?
Oh my goodness, somebody has been in my head. Yes. So I really want to move. Just last night, I was like, okay, I need to do these audiobooks. So yes, I really, really, really want to move into audiobooks. I already have the book. So I'm a big fan of repurposing your content. So it's like I already have my books in different formats, paperback, hardcover, ebooks. Why on earth am I not selling them, as audio versions on Audible, for example? So yes, I definitely want to, and I encourage everyone else to do that as well. There aren't really a lot of children's books that I've seen. And if I already have these books, all I have to do is get a narrator and they could probably be online in maybe a few weeks. So definitely want to. So thank you for whoever asked that. It's a good reminder.
All right. What key mistakes did you make early on that you've since learned from?
Oh, well, I already shared the horror story about the illustrator. So, oh man, I have another embarrassing mistake. So this is all right. So my illustrator wanted to know what color I wanted one of my characters to be.
Hmm.
And, and so I just went on Google and like typed in tan color, right? And got the hex code and sent it over. And so like literally to this day, because I didn't change it, I have a character. It's not the main character. It's like, just a student in one of the classrooms that is legit like orange. She's orange. She's orange. And so that was one mistake, was not really knowing skin tone colors and doing a better job with
Hmm.
that. I've since learned. But then the other mistake I would make is definitely just waiting. I told you, I waited like 6 years in between trying to publish that first children's book because I ran into a roadblock with finding an illustrator. That's
Hmm.
a lot of years that my book could have been out and I could have been writing other books. And
Hmm.
to me, what I've learned is that the time that you spend sitting on your book is time that that book could have been selling. That's time that
Right.
that book could have been in the hands of the readers that needed it.
Hmm. Hmm.
So overthinking and just waiting for the right moment, waiting for perfection when nothing will ever be perfect. Those are the mistakes that I've made. I have learned from them. Still, I'm a recovering perfectionist, but I've definitely learned that done is better than perfect.
Right, right. That fear and doubt, I think, really kind of keeps a lot of us back from doing what we want to do. And the thing is, you can put something out there. If it doesn't sell later, you can take it back, but at least you've done that first step.
Exactly. And unfortunately, a lot of the people that I talk to, they say, man, I wrote a book 5 years ago. I've been
Right,
working on a book for 7 years. I'm like, what's the problem? Come on and publish that
right,
thing.
right. Because that feedback is that learning experience. Um,
Definitely, it
um,
is.
mhm,
I think people, they are afraid, what if people don't like it? What will people
right,
say? What will people think? I know, right? I don't have a degree in writing.
right.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
You don't need special degrees or certifications to write,
Hmm.
so that's definitely the biggest thing is people are afraid to do it. But once you
Hmm.
do it, it you realize, what on earth was I waiting for? Why did it take this
Right.
long? It wasn't as bad as I thought. And now look how my life has changed now that I've become a
Mhm.
published author.
Right, right. This is a really great question. As an author, because you talked about hiring an illustrator to do your illustrations. Do you share your book profits with the illustrators, or do you buy your images straight out?
Yes, I do buy my images. So I do work for hire contracts, which means
Hmm.
that I own the rights to the illustrations and use them however I want. Um, and I've done it both ways. I've done it both ways, and I much prefer the work for hire
Hmm.
because otherwise, I mean, it's a whole job
Hmm.
to have to send somebody royalties, and I don't want to send someone royalties for the rest of my life. I don't want to be
Right,
90 years old, like, let me send these royalties to this illustrator. So I
right.
really prefer to just, own my illustrations.
Uh-huh.
And you can do that if you pay a little bit more for your illustrations. So
Hmm.
sometimes an illustrator will say, oh, this is my price. And, but I will still own the copyright. But you could say, okay, well, what if I pay you this much for,
Hmm.
to do it as a work for hire? And they'll often agree to that.
Okay. The contract that you talked about, I think one of the questions that pops into my head is, where do you get those contracts? Did you work with a lawyer to put that together, or was that something you found?
I did. So my very first ones, I just Googled work for hire contract, and you can
Uh-huh.
find a lot of them online,
Right.
specifically for illustrators. You literally just fill in their name, your name, So it's pretty standard. There's very standard terminology. And then later on, I did have a lawyer look and make some adjustments to the one that I was using just to make sure I was, all the way good. So yeah,
Right.
they're easy to find. And I definitely recommend that everyone hiring an illustrator have a contract. I've seen too many cases, unfortunately, where people hire, not even hire, my best friend did my book. My best friend did the illustrations for my book, but now we're not friends anymore and I
Mhm.
can't use them. You always think that things will be perfect, right? But it's just better to always have things in writing, get your contract, so that if something falls through with your friend or your cousin or whoever it is that you were working with, you have that contract to fall back on.
Right, right. And I think that that goes along with a couple other questions we had about copyright. And I think with especially illustration and the narrative, can you talk a little bit about, do you copyright your books prior to publication?
I don't always copyright prior to publication. I'm more of a let me get this book out type of girl. But I think you get 5 years to do it. So if you haven't done it, you still have time to do it. Copywriting is important, and also when it comes to the copyright, one of the things I've been seeing more recently is just making sure that you even own those illustrations to begin with. So not just
Right.
copywriting your work. All right, you know that you wrote that. So that part is different. But when you're hiring people, sometimes you could end up getting some illustrations from someone that maybe belonged to someone else. And I actually saw something kind of similar where there was someone that had a book and then discovered that
Mhm.
someone else had a book that was being worked on by the same illustrators, and the characters looked almost exactly the same. Um,
Oh,
but see, I think that's another reason to really make sure that you are customizing your character.
mhm.
Maybe don't take that first one that someone sends you. Make like by the time I'm done with the character, they're totally different from how they were originally. So yeah, I would definitely say just be very careful about where you get your illustrations from, who
Uh-huh.
you're hiring, so that you can make sure that it's not something that you actually can't use or someone else's copyright.
Right, right. Why don't you use the same illustrator for all your books? Or do you? I don't think we asked that
I
question.
don't know. Very interesting. And what's funny is I've had kids ask me that because kids are, I mean, they will look and say, wait, is this a different illustrator? So there's no specific reason per se.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I'm working on multiple books at once. And so if I have an illustrator doing something, I need someone else to do the other book. But then I also have illustrators that for me do really beautiful, beautiful line art and do the best coloring books. So that's what I want to
Hmm.
use for that. Then I might have an
Hmm.
illustrator that really does beautiful like digital painting style art, which I really like.
Hmm.
And not all of them can do that. So I have that person for that. So yeah, I have a couple of illustrators. Um, and I mean, I think it's fun. Honestly, that's part of like finding a new illustrator who
Uh-huh.
can draw characters a little bit differently is really fun to me. So I guess I like variety.
So do you do coloring books of your books as well? As
I
oh, okay.
do. I do. So okay, you see this book, I'm a Pretty Princess.
Yes.
So I literally, not that long ago, released that same book as a coloring book.
Oh,
And
wonderful.
this is one of the things I love to do. I tell people if you're going to spend the money to have illustrations drawn,
Uh-huh.
use it to your advantage and make sure that you're getting it in a way that you can make a coloring book from those same images. You
Right.
can make a picture book. So yeah, I love to do that. And parents and kids love it because once kids have discovered a character of yours that they like, they want to see more of that character. And this is a really easy way to add a second book and make it a little bit different from what the original book is. So I put activities in mine, mazes and all sorts of things. And coloring books are one of my favorite things to do.
Well, that's an interesting call. So, with novels, a lot of them are serial, right? So they do series. That's a little different for a children's book that you don't really have that opportunity. So this is a great way to, one, repurpose the artwork that you're spending money on, and two, get that character out again. Do you ever use a character over again in an actual book?
Um, not yet. So I have
Uh-huh.
characters that are in other coloring books, and then I put them all together in one coloring book, the girls and the boys. So I just do really fun stuff. But so far, I'm looking in the background. None of these characters have made a second appearance. Not yet, anyway.
Gotcha. How do you go about, you talked about you get the title first. What's your process for taking that title and then actually fleshing out the storyline?
Well, I mentioned that I primarily write in rhyme. So when you write in rhyme, it's basically like you're just writing one long poem, right?
Right.
And then you put that poem into a book.
Uh-huh.
So for something about the fact that I write in rhyme makes it easier for me to come up with that title and know how I'm going to use it, because usually I'm going to have it repeat throughout. Kind of
Right.
like a song. You know how songs have a
Right.
chorus? That's usually kind of
Right.
how my titles are. So I don't know. It's very easy for me. But I've been writing in rhyme since I was a kid. I've been doing it for
Uh-huh.
years and years and years. So the writing portion of this whole thing comes so naturally to me.
Hmm.
Um, but because of that, I really challenge myself to maybe in the next year or two write books that are not in rhyme and
Uh-huh.
do some chapter books. So that's going to stretch
Oh.
me because I'm so comfortable with rhyme, um,
Uh-huh.
that I want to, kind of venture out and do something different.
Right, right. Kind of like the children that are currently reading your books with those chapter books that they're growing up with you.
Yes, yes. I love the thought of that.
Um, what avenues of book marketing to you have been most successful? So we talk usually about social media, or we talked a little bit about having it in schools and marketing to the parent. What marketing avenue is most successful for you?
um, Two ways. First is just complete word of mouth. And the word
Uh-huh.
of mouth comes from, well, just keep in mind that things will eventually get back to normal. So I did a
Right.
lot of events. I'm
Yeah.
talking about any sort of expo, any place I knew that my ideal avatar would be
Hmm.
at, I was there every event. So I would have my
Hmm.
little books all set up with my booth. And, if the events had 500 people, 3,000 people, 5,000 people, I've
Hmm.
always got a good booth and I had a beautiful display. And that made the biggest difference for me, especially in the first few years, because I would go to those same events every single year and people would literally buy me out. Like I could sell all of my books at
Uh-huh.
once. So instead of just selling one or two online, people would
Right.
let me buy every one of these. I would have
Uh-huh.
special deals. So that was one of the biggest ways up front. But then the second way, so it's a combination of these two things, is influencer marketing.
Hmm.
So I used YouTube. That has always been my absolute best avenue of marketing. And it's something that I recommend to people because the videos that people created of themselves reading their books, my books to their kids, are still there.
Right.
I'm marketing that I can do one time and then it lives on for many years. So you see a lot of authors that are just, they're on social media. Hey, buy my book on sale today, last chance. That doesn't work. Throw that whole strategy away. It's not a strategy. I want something where it's not just a post that's going to disappear in 1 hour. It's something that's
Hmm.
going to live on for a long time. And YouTube for me has been the absolute best way to do that.
So how do you reach out to those influencers to encourage them to read your book? Do you just send them a copy?
you send them an email. I send them an email. So
Okay.
I literally go on YouTube and do research. I look for people that are my ideal avatar. And
Right.
then so you have to have kids. The kids have to be of a certain age. There's just like very specific things. But it's like a lot of people on YouTube anyway, you're just playing around watching cat videos. So
Right.
why not do some research for your book? So yeah, you just send them
Uh-huh.
an email, offer to send them a free copy, ask if they would like to, receive a copy of your
Mhm.
book to read on their channel, be personal with it. I think, little Sammy would love this. And if you send enough, you'll get some people who say yes.
Yes. I think that's actually the first time I've heard that strategy, and I'm sitting here going, "That's brilliant. That's absolutely brilliant. I love it."
I've got a whole script and everything like this. It's worked extremely well.
Good. How do you decide the price point for your book?
Okay, that's a pretty good question. So for price point, I have a little calculation I like to use, but for the sake of this, typically I look at what other books are priced at, but then I also
Uh-huh.
have to look at the lowest price I can set my book and still earn a profit. So really it's
Mhm.
up to you. You have to decide how much profit do you want per book. Are you comfortable
Mhm.
with $2 of profit per book? Do you want $1? Do you want 5? If you want 5, you're probably not going to sell any books because it's going to price you out
Mhm.
of what a lot of the other books online are priced at. So
Mhm.
yeah, I just kind of, I'm pretty comfortable with a couple of dollars, $2 or $3 per book. And then I call it a day, set my price. I feel good about it and people buy. But one of the things about your price is that you can always change it. So if you
Uh-huh.
notice that you're not really getting a lot of sales, drop your price for a month. Drop it significantly because the price point is where I see most people go wrong. They're trying to
Uh-huh.
earn too much per book sale. They're trying to make $5, $10 per book sale, and now their book is like $19.99 for a 32-page book by an unknown author
Right.
with no reviews. No reviews. No one's gonna buy it. You're gonna get one book
Right.
sell a month, and it's gonna be one of your friends. So
Right. It's
the
your
price
mom.
point's
She's
very
buying
important.
it once a month.
Yeah. One per month. So yeah, that price is very important, and I like to err on the cheaper side because I'd rather
Mhm.
get 2,000 sales per month and make $2 per copy than get
Mhm.
10 sales a month and get $10 per copy.
You mentioned that events are your bread and butter. That's how you market. You're at those events. Um, that's changed significantly in the past year. How has that impacted your strategy? What are you doing now?
Oh, well, yeah, every single event that I was planning on doing, things I've done literally since 2013, I couldn't do anymore.
Hmm.
But thank goodness I had been using my YouTube strategy. So after a certain point, you don't have to do, quite as many things if
Hmm.
you've kind of done smart marketing to begin with. But now I spent most of that time really building up my online presence. So
Uh-huh.
all right, I've got a lot more time now. So let me make sure that my website is up. Let me make sure I'm, producing more books, reaching out to people, trying to get press. So a lot of
Hmm.
different things that can still get my books in front of other people without me having to be in person.
Okay.
And
All right.
virtually work as well.
Right. Right. Sorry, I'm desperately, we've only got 5 minutes left, so I'm looking for this really amazing. It's flown by. Today has flown by. Um, so I'm trying to find something that's really amazing that to ask you. Um, and we've answered a lot of these.
Goodies.
Oh, editors. Do you use an editor for your book?
I do not use an editor for my books, but that's because I am an editor.
Uh-huh.
I encourage people who are not editors to use an editor.
Right. Okay. Um, Do you have your illustrators sign an NDA?
I
No?
don't. I don't. I don't show them any sort of, secret information about my business or company. So
Right.
yeah, there's nothing for them to find out. There's nothing for them to disclose.
Okay. I think this will be the last one. What's your go-to-market strategy? So can you kind of walk us through your book's done, it's all ready for publish. What do you do? Do you do any marketing prior to republication or after? What does that look like?
No. So I like to market my books in bulk. So
Uh-huh.
I've really focused on putting out more and more books. You can't really earn a good living from books if you don't have a lot of books. So I really focus
Hmm.
on putting out multiple at a time or within a certain time frame, and then I market. And when I do market, I use that YouTube strategy, the influencer strategy that I mentioned, because that way I can send them 5 books at a time, 8 books at a time, instead of just one. So I like to get more
Right.
bang for my buck when I market by marketing in bulk.
Okay. Rebecca wants to know, what's your biggest challenge that has absolutely nothing to do with the actual writing or illustration of the book?
Ooh, biggest challenge. Focus. It really is focus, because there's so many distractions. You feel like you have to be here, there, everywhere. And if you're trying to do all the things, you won't really do any of them extremely well. So I've
Uh-huh.
started cutting things out, turning off notifications on my phone, really building in a dedicated focus time in my day so I can get more done.
So what does your day look like? How much of it is business? How much is writing?
My days to me, they're absolutely amazing, because I literally set my own schedule. I just wake up whenever I want to. I'll probably take a nap after this. I actually work overnight. So I stay up all night and work,
Uh-huh.
like literally midnight until 9 or 10 a.m. I like to stay up and work, extremely
Uh-huh.
quiet. Then during the day, if I don't have any meetings or calls like this, I just relax, hang out with the husband, just
That's it.
it's just whatever I want my day to look like. And that's what I
Right.
love about publishing. Yeah, it's just whatever I want my day to look like.
It's official. I'm retiring from my job and I'm writing children's books. So you make it sound, you really make it sound so attractive and easy, even though I know that it's not. I think that your process and your attitude just make it really attractive.
It's so fun. It's really the best thing I could have ever done. I love it. I love
Good.
it.
On that note, we have to say goodbye because that's an hour. Oh my goodness. But I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing all that amazing information.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for the questions. This has been fun. If you're on the fence about writing your book, write that book, okay?
And on that note, happy publishing, everyone.